The roar of the crowd inside the stadium in Inglewood, Los Angeles, was deafening. It was the NBA All-Star Game, a pinnacle of athletic excellence and cultural celebration, and when the Jumbotron cameras panned to the audience, the entire arena erupted into a spontaneous, overwhelming standing ovation. They were not cheering for a player on the court, nor were they cheering for a Hollywood celebrity. They were cheering for former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. The sheer volume of the applause, the unprompted display of genuine affection and respect, painted a vivid picture of the current cultural landscape. It was a moment of unity, joy, and profound decency. And thousands of miles away, in the isolated, gilded halls of Mar-a-Lago, that thunderous applause was echoing like a psychological nightmare for Donald Trump. Yeah, we are witnessing a profound and undeniable contrast in real time, a split-screen reality of American life that perfectly encapsulates the current political and cultural divide. On one side, you have the Obamas, unfazed, relaxed, and universally celebrated, serving as a reminder of an era where decorum, grace, and steady leadership were the baseline expectations of the highest office in the land. When asked about playing in front of the former president, NBA superstar Anthony Edwards could not contain his excitement, stating candidly that Obama is his favorite person in the world, that they had spent time together the previous day, and that he was absolutely motivated to put on a show for him. That is the kind of organic cultural reverence that money cannot buy and threats cannot manufacture. On the other side of the split screen is a flailing, desperate, and increasingly unhinged Donald Trump, who spent his weekend golfing with Liz Truss, the disgraced former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, whose catastrophic economic policies famously tanked the British markets in record time. While the Obamas were celebrating Valentine's Day with heartfelt, elegant messages, Barack calling Michelle his forever dance partner, and Michelle affectionately referring to him as her teammate on and off the court, Donald Trump was spiraling into a chaotic, grievance-fueled meltdown on his Truth Social platform. Instead of a message of love or unity, Trump posted a bizarre, rambling attack on comedian Bill Maher. It read like the diary entries of a man entirely detached from reality. Trump claimed that Maher had approached him looking nervous, pretending to like him, but then went on television to trash him. Trump then bizarrely pivoted to an anecdote about warning Canada that China was going to steal your ice hockey, insisting he was only joking, before descending into a volley of playground insults. It was weird, it was deranged, and it highlighted a profound psychological deterioration. But this erratic behavior is not merely the product of a bruised ego jealous of a standing ovation. It is a calculated, albeit incredibly sloppy, mechanism of distraction. Donald Trump is currently drowning in the fallout of the largest and most damning document release in modern legal history, the unsealed Jeffrey Epstein files. Facing absolute exposure, Trump resorted to the lowest, most vile tactic imaginable to redirect the media narrative. In a blatantly flagrant display of racism, Trump shared a digitally altered image depicting President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as apes. This is not a dog whistle, it is a blaring siren of white supremacist ideology. It invokes a centuries-old, violently racist trope used by slave traders and segregationists to dehumanize black people and justify the most horrific atrocities in American history. The intent was twofold: to cater to the absolute darkest, most prejudiced corners of his political base, and to create an outrage cycle massive enough to pull the public's eyes away from the thousands of pages of court documents currently cementing his ties to a prolific child sex trafficking ring. The strategy, however, has failed spectacularly. The public sees right through the smokescreen, and the sheer volume of the Epstein revelations is simply too massive to ignore. We are not talking about a passing acquaintance or a few chance encounters at a high society gala. Let us look at the hard, verifiable statistics from the Department of Justice's release. Within this staggering archive of over 1.4 million documented pages, Jeffrey Epstein's assistant, Leslie Groff, is mentioned 157,613 times. Epstein's accountant, Richard Kahn, is referenced 52,781 times. And Donald Trump, along with his wife Melania, is referenced more than 38,000 times. Read that number again. Over 38,000 references to the current president of the United States in the internal files of a convicted human trafficker. His name appears in these harrowing investigative documents more frequently than the names of historical figures appear in their own biographies. The specifics contained within these newly uncovered files are deeply disturbing and suggest a level of coordination and intimacy that completely shatters Trump's flimsy defense that he barely knew the guy. Take, for instance, an email sent on June 8th, 2018 from Jeffrey Epstein to an artist named Andres Serrano. Epstein, casually discussing artwork, writes, "One Madonna on the way. Instead of torture photo, maybe portrait of me instead. Presentation of Trumpville." The casual reference to Trumpville intertwined with discussions of torture photos paints a grim picture of their shared world. Then there is the email from April 18, 2011, sent by a private investigator named William Riley directly to Epstein. Riley asks a chilling question. "Before I call Trump with regard to Virginia, are there any alternatives?" The Virginia referenced here is widely understood to be Virginia Roberts Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent victims, who has bravely come forward to detail the horrors of the trafficking network. Why would a private investigator working for Epstein need to consult with Donald Trump regarding one of Epstein's primary victims? What operational or legal alternative were they discussing? These are not the communications of men who simply crossed paths at a golf club. These are the urgent, coordinated communications of co-conspirators managing a crisis. Perhaps the most startling revelation regarding the operational overlap between Epstein's criminal enterprise and Trump's political apparatus involves Jess Staley, the former top banker at J.P. Morgan, who later became the CEO of Barclays before resigning in utter disgrace when his own sordid connections to Epstein were exposed. The files contain a message from Epstein directing communication through Jess Staley's daughter. Epstein asked her to inquire if her father would like to be considered for Treasury. He was explicitly asking if Staley wanted to be the Secretary of the United States Treasury under the Trump administration. Staley's daughter replied, "Just spoke with him. He said not yet, but thanks." Let the magnitude of that exchange sink in. Jeffrey Epstein, a man operating a global blackmail and trafficking ring, was effectively functioning as a shadow personnel director for the Trump transition team, offering cabinet-level positions to international banking executives. And the Arat extends far beyond cabinet appointments. The documents have ripped the mask off the entire mega ecosystem. We have learned that Steve Bannon, Trump's chief ideological architect, was communicating with Epstein extensively, plotting a shadow campaign to blackmail and bring down Pope Francis. Why? Because the Pope's progressive stances on poverty and climate change were viewed as a threat to the global populist nationalist movement they were trying to construct. We also learned that Dr. Mehmet Oz, a prominent Trump ally and political candidate, literally invited Jeffrey Epstein to a Valentine's Day party. Between Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary pick whose name is tied to bringing individuals to the island, and Dr. Oz mingling with the trafficker, the Trump orbit is exposed as the absolute epicenter of this cabal. Realizing that the sheer weight of these 38,000 references was becoming politically fatal, the Trump regime launched a desperate disinformation campaign. Over the weekend, Trump and his surrogates pushed a blatantly fabricated Epstein client list onto social media channels. In a clumsy effort to muddy the waters and completely dilute the credibility of the actual Department of Justice release, this fake list included the names of legendary deceased figures like Janis Joplin, Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, and random politicians like Dan Quayle. The goal of this psychological operation is obvious. Flood the zone with so much absurdity and easily debunked nonsense that the exhausted American public throws its hands up and assumes the entire Epstein scandal is just another internet hoax. It is an abhorrent, despicable abuse of power, gaslighting the nation to protect the guilty and silence the survivors. This utter lack of shame and decency is precisely what former President Obama addressed in a recently released interview. When asked about Trump's racist ape photo and the general degradation of political discourse, Obama maintained his characteristic poise and perspective. He astutely pointed out that the majority of the American people find this behavior deeply troubling. While acknowledging that Trump's circus act generates attention and serves as a potent distraction, Obama noted that as he travels across the country, he consistently meets citizens who still believe in fundamental decency, courtesy, and kindness. He highlighted the tragedy of the current moment, the complete evaporation of shame among individuals who once understood the necessity of decorum, propriety, and respect for the office. Yet Obama remains hopeful, asserting that the ultimate remedy to this clown show will come from the American people themselves, a sentiment echoed by the massive pushback we are currently witnessing in places like Minnesota. While Trump and his allies scramble to suppress the Epstein fallout, they are simultaneously executing executing a terrifyingly aggressive agenda to suppress the American voter. Recognizing that a highly engaged, well-informed electorate is their greatest threat, the administration is moving to dismantle democratic access. Trump took to social media to aggressively demand universal voter ID for the upcoming midterms. Whether approved by Congress or not, he predictably relied on the tired, thoroughly debunked lie that Democrats refuse these measures because they want to continue to cheat. But the true sinister motive behind these electoral purges was accidentally spoken aloud by Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. During a weekend appearance, Noem openly stated that the administration must be proactive to ensure they have the right people voting in order to elect the right leaders to lead the country. This phrasing sent chills down the spines of civil rights advocates across the nation. The concept of the government deciding who the right people are to cast a ballot is the textbook definition of authoritarianism. When confronted with Noem's chilling admission, Tom Homan, the administration's border czar, awkwardly attempted to deflect, claiming he had not spoken to the secretary about her comments and weakly suggesting she simply meant legal voters. But the damage was done, the quiet part was said out loud, and the intent to curate the electorate to maintain power was laid bare for the world to see. This brings us to Tom Homan himself, who spent his weekend engaging in a masterclass of gaslighting to defend the increasingly brutal and legally dubious tactics of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. As reports flood in from across the country of communities living in terror, of sweeping raids, and of agents operating with total impunity, Homan looked directly into the camera and flatly denied that racial profiling was occurring. He claimed that agents only briefly detain and question individuals based on reasonable suspicion. This directly contradicts mountains of on-the-ground reporting and thousands of testimonies from citizens and legal residents who have been targeted, harassed, and detained simply because of the color of their skin or the language they were speaking in a grocery store. Homan then attempted to justify one of the most dystopian visuals of this new enforcement era: federal agents operating in American neighborhoods wearing tactical masks to conceal their identities. He claimed that he didn't like the masks either, but asserted that they were entirely necessary, throwing out staggering, unverified statistics. Homan alleged that threats against ICE officers are up over 1,500% and that actual assaults and threats combined are up over 8,000%. By presenting these massive fear-inducing numbers, Homan is attempting to construct a narrative where federal agents are the victims in a war zone, thereby justifying the use of anonymous paramilitary tactics against unarmed civilian populations. He argued that the agents all wear placards identifying their agency, completely missing the point that a secret police force operating without individual accountability is fundamentally incompatible with a free society. The most alarming segment of Homan's weekend defense tour, however, centered on the administration's brazen circumvention of the judicial system. When pressed on why ICE is storming private property without judicial warrants signed by an independent judge after reviewing evidence of probable cause, Homan hid behind administrative bureaucracy. He argued that federal law, specifically the Immigration and Nationality Act, grants them the power to make arrests using administrative warrants. An administrative warrant is essentially a piece of paper printed and signed by the agency itself. It is a permission slip written by the enforcer for the enforcer. When an interviewer rightly pointed out that Homan had previously agreed that judicial warrants were necessary for searches and questioned his sudden change of heart, Homan deflected the responsibility to the Department of Justice. He claimed he had not changed his mind, but that DOJ lawyers had interpreted the law to mean that in certain circumstances, if someone has a final order of removal, an administrative warrant is sufficient to enter a premises. This is a terrifying legal loophole. The Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution explicitly protects all people on American soil from unreasonable searches and seizures, stipulating that warrants must be issued by a judge upon probable cause. By relying on internal administrative documents to kick down doors, the administration is bypassing the judicial branch entirely, stripping away one of the most critical checks and balances designed to protect the privacy and safety of the individual against the terrifying power of the state. We are standing at a critical precipice. Every day brings a new revelation, a new erosion of a democratic norm, and a new attempt to distract the public from systemic corruption. From a president utilizing racist racist imagery, to hide his deep 38,000 reference involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, to cabinet members openly discussing restricting the vote to the right people, to federal agencies defending mass raids and warrantless searches, the architecture of our republic is under immense strain. But the standing ovation in Los Angeles tells another story. It tells the story of a public that has not forgotten what dignity looks like. It shows that despite the daily barrage of chaos, cruelty, and clownish behavior, the cultural heart of the country still beats for decency, for community, and for our common humanity. The contrast has never been clearer, and the choice of which path to follow has never been more urgent. Make sure to stay engaged, stay vigilant, and never stop demanding the truth.